So we are looking at, I'm going to be reviewing this video that is called Why Men Overwhelmingly Don't Read Fiction. And I just wanted to just give my comments, I guess. And really what it boils down to is I think it's interesting that they ask, a lot of fictions, certainly I wouldn't say that men don't like fiction, but I think, throughout history, fiction, is an art form that, during the early 1900s, right, you used to have a lot of pulp fiction, a lot of sort of, like that used to be a thing. Before TV, people used to read for fun. And there was actually a lot of kind of fun content, if you want to think of it that way. That there was writing that appealed to that appealed to different people, right? You didn't have to be that smart to read it, because a lot of books they tend to be, particularly the classic books, they tend to be highfalutin. They are more difficult to. They're books that you're meant to think about, and it also requires, of course, a collegiate mindset. So you have to understand big words. You have to have an appreciation for the arts, an appreciation of what's happening. So all of those things are necessary. But in today's world, I always think, why is it that, generally speaking, I guess maybe I should just answer it myself instead of speaking for other people. I could talk about why I think other people might not. Just in general, it's more visual, right? So that's probably what it might be, right? But in terms of what, for example, men are just more visual in terms of how they approach things. But let's just see. Okay, I'm going to go through these. So here they talk about the people that are in there. Okay, so some people read self-help books. I like self-help books. I have read some. I enjoy it. I think the issue with self-help books is that they tend to be really short, and they don't really say much, and a lot of it tends to be. It's good, right? It tends to compile a lot of good ideas, but it also is not always. A lot of it is just kind of wishy-washy. It kind of feels like just hand waving, and what I mean by that is that when you read self-help books, a lot of they kind of say the same thing, and so if anything, if I want to read a self-help book, I almost want to read something that is not what you would typically think would be the answer, because I think that's just more intriguing. And a lot of it, as I've said, life is what you make of it. So a lot of times, a lot of the advice, you could have contradictory advice and still have it work in some capacity. So that's that's how I approach it. Now, as far as self-help books, yeah, I think it's good to especially if you want to get some ideas, and certain concepts tend to be universal, but I also believe in the just variety of styles in which people can approach life, and in which people can succeed. So I actually think you could succeed using contradictory concepts, and still have it work in some ways. So really, self-help books are good, but you want to sort of customize it, I guess, to your own lifestyle and what works for you. Let's see this. Okay, so this person reads, so according to the article, right, to the video, reads history books. Me personally, I do like history. I used to collect I would buy history books. I enjoyed reading it. And I actually like textbooks, to be honest with you. They tend to be well written as far as history books are concerned. But so I do like textbooks. Textbooks I love. But the thing is, I feel like history is interesting And it's great to see what other people have lived through, because it kind of inspires you. And you can find so many analogs and reverberations, right, from the past that still apply to today. But a lot of it is just different. And a lot of it is just about learning different perspectives and how different people lived and what the things that the concerns that people in the past had. A lot of it is not relevant to today. And I think what you will learn is that we need to build kind of our own future and build our own present, I should say, because it's different. Like, we're at the end of the day, we're all different. And, the way things used to be, it's so specific to their time that I don't think, there are certain things that are universal, I guess. But then there are other things where I really do believe that you could do things differently. I don't know. As long as it's for a better way. But as far as like styles and fashion, I would love to see new things. Like, we really should. I'm certain that at some point in history, and I mean the future when I talk about history, I don't know if that's the correct way to. Is there a word for future that mean for history, but of the future of what could be? I don't know if, because the word history, I guess the story, the future story, if you want to say. I don't know, but I would hope that at some point, if our society continues, right, if there's a modern world, that somehow our fashions and our modes of doing things will change. Because I feel like we're kind of stagnating. So yeah, that's the only thing I think that would be interesting about history, is just seeing how other people did things that is going to be different than how it is done today. So that is interesting to learn about. And the last... Okay, this person reads political books and classic novels. So, like classic, I love novels. Like I said, novels are great. But, the question becomes, do people read, why do people read books? Or should people read fiction? And then they kind of, in the video, they kind of do this interview with this writer. And there they are, I guess, in a bar. That's the place to talk about this. I don't know if I would read in a bar like this. Would you? An interesting place, but I guess it's a place to like meet people or whatever, or to just talk. It's lively. Like, it would be nice. Couldn't you just decorate your house like this? I don't know. But yeah, so I will say, okay, so here's the thing. Like, fiction, yes, fiction allows you to put yourself in the position of someone else, to be inspired by how a character does things, to, all of this. And I think it's good for, I actually, I understand that books, if you've ever read a good book, which I recommend, at least doing, one time, so that you can see how intense it is. It's actually pretty intense. I would say it's more intense than movies. Like, if you think movies are good, movies can be good, actually, if you get into them as well, but a book can, like, haunt you. Fiction books can be extraordinary if you understand them and if you are able to get something out of it. So I'm not disagreeing that, fiction books, they take you out. They give you sort of They give you a space in which you can escape this reality and go into someone else's world. So that has some value. But I also, when I look at it, I guess the reason why, like, I understand the value. I guess maybe that's something that I certainly want to promote in this channel, is the idea of an appreciation for the arts. That's not something that everyone has, but for anybody who does, I truly do believe that art and books and movies and all things that are, these things that are creations, but really they're the imagination and the ability to create ideas and have us, something that means something, that shows our humanity and tells a story. Like, these are all things that are valuable, things that I value and all my life, and that makes reading amazing. But at the end of the day, we have this question, and I'm answering, why men overwhelmingly don't read fiction, and why am I not reading fiction? And, the answer to that would be, I've read a couple of books, I've spent years reading, right? But I've reached a point in my life where I just don't feel like reading. I mean, I just don't want to waste, I don't know, it's like a waste of time to me anyway. But that sounds so bad to say because, of course, this is a study channel, and I'm actually, well, I haven't gotten into it, but I guess I should. I would love to get into how learning and how I love learning. That doesn't mean that I don't like to read. It just means I don't like reading fiction, right? So that doesn't mean I haven't read fiction or that I don't want to even read fiction. It's just that life is short, and I just don't read personally fiction. But that doesn't mean, obviously if I was reading an English class or I was teaching an English class or whatever, or being a tutor for it, I wouldn't, of course I would read it. But then I do think it's important to appreciate and reading comprehension, the ability to analyze text. All of that is good. And all of that is helpful because it helps you in your life, right? Like we're able to analyze our own life because if we're able to analyze what, a text allows you to sort of practice what you do in the kind of, I don't know if you want to call it the virtual world, but into the literary world, and then transfer that into the real world. And so it's a great kind of sandbox in that sense, but it's not really a sandbox. And the thing is, I don't really control what happens in a book, right? And so I kind of don't like that about books, to be honest with you. One of the reasons why I avoid and eschew books is that I just don't want to read someone else's stories. Honestly, I would rather just create my own story. I'd rather live my own life. I'd rather do what I like to do. I've reached a point in my life where I like what I like. And so in that sense, books, the fiction books particularly, do not carry the same weight. And they're not really as relevant to me. But that doesn't mean, of course, I wouldn't do it if I were assigned to read it, or that they are not valuable, or that, you shouldn't read it at some point. If I had all the time in the world, I would love to read and analyze all of those books that they made you read in high school and college, right? Like that would be so awesome because I know those books are great and they have a lot of value. Oh, there's another picture. Okay. So they have value. They have a value for, in terms of the ability to make people understand and appreciate the world, because that's what fiction is a celebration of. Now, as far as reading, so the reason why I don't read is because I just don't. Well, I already know how to read, but it's just I prefer to read nonfiction. To be honest with you, I prefer to read textbooks. I prefer to read things where I learned something, so it's a different approach. It's not that I don't read. And even the reading process itself, it's great, but I think equally as great is also the creation process. And so, for some people, the ability to create can also serve as sort of an extension of what reading is, because ultimately reading is you're reading someone else's ideas. And so I think a very valuable thing is to create your own idea. So right now, right, this video is not, it's not me reading a text. And actually I didn't write a script for this video. So in some videos I do. I probably should, maybe in most videos. I don't know, I want to maybe. Some of my videos are scripted, like the first video in this channel. But this video that I'm making right now, right, it's not scripted. And so what ideas are going to come out, right? This is to me, I don't know. We're both exploring what's going to come out of my mouth right now because I actually don't know. I don't know any more than you do. So we're actually both exploring this together. So do you see how sometimes even thinking, the imagination itself is a substitute for a book? I don't even need to read a book sometimes. Well, I've gotten to a point where I kind of surprise myself. And I don't know how to describe it, but all of the years of experience and knowledge the attainment of knowledge, I guess, makes what I do today. And so I enjoy thinking and imagining and using my imagination to think about thoughts, because I think it's important to push the envelope and go into new frontiers. And I want to see that. And I don't just want, a remake or a repetition, or, see the same story that I already saw, right? So I think that's the value. I think creation is also important. And I think perhaps this video is kind of missing out on that, and the idea that, yeah, it's great to be a reader, but reading is a passive activity, and creation is also sort of another activity you could do, or a replacement. And so there are other things that people could be doing outside of reading fiction. And I wouldn't say it's not just a man thing, because there's a lot of women that don't read either. So it's not even, I don't even think it's about that either. Now, as far as reading itself, I would think that it's obviously, I do recommend it, and I think it's great if, that people do read, and that people find there are so many things that you can learn from reading and be inspired by, but then there are other things that go beyond reading. And so I'm merely answering the question, like, why am I not reading fiction? Is because, do I prefer fiction? For me, it's kind of a waste of time in my life, at my point in my life, because I've already read. I've read a lot. And so it's gotten to the point where I'd rather just kind of live. I kind of just want to do my own thing. So that's why I am, that's why I've chosen not to read. But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate it, or that other people might not find value in it. And so some people like to create, and some people like to just consume. And there's nothing wrong with either. And whatever makes you happy in your life, that's what you should do. And so I've talked about that a lot in this channel. And now, as far as reading itself, why, what do I, or I should say why, I should probably qualify, why do I think reading, why is fiction kind of a waste of time for me? I guess, I've kind of already said it. It feels to me like it's someone else's ideas. And sometimes I want to be taken on a ride by someone else's imagination. Sometimes it's interesting for historical reasons. Sometimes I want to see what people were thinking, because, what somebody says, they are a product of their time. And so, if you read something from the 1950s, a novel or a book, the concerns and the trepidations and the thinkings that people had during the 1950s is going to it's going to be into the text, imbued into the text in a way and so that makes reading and novel writing interesting. And that's why it's so important that we document and write out our thoughts, because we're going to be a product of today's world. And so people are, they should be able to they should be able to read what we're thinking based on our own perspective. And I think too often in society today, people take fiction in the wrong way. They take fiction and art, and they kind of just copy it, or they just want to emulate it. They want to use it as a template. And I think that's what I don't like about fiction. It's not that I don't like fiction. It's just that I don't like how it's being used in today's world. So generally speaking, people are not. It's almost like we've given up, almost as a part of laziness. And it's not a bad thing. It's not even difficult to do, to be honest with you. It really isn't. It's something that humans we're meant to create. We're meant to do. And at the end of the day, when you're reading, you're not doing. You're just passive. And so there is something. And then worse than just passive is when you try to create in a passive way by just taking, or by just using it as launching pads to do other things. And to me, I think it would be so much valuable if we did the same thing that a lot of these writers did. That the writing and the fiction and the writers should be, instead of being a launching pad or a launching board, for what, for ideas that we could use or we could be inspired by. Well, I think it's good to just use it as inspiration, as in use their activity, or be inspired by the act of creating a book. In other words, that's what we should be inspired by also. And so, I think it's important that as a society, or that, that we create, that we go back into creating things. And I think if we could celebrate that, then that would be a good thing. And so for me, that's why currently in my life, or at least at my stage, I don't really read fiction, but that doesn't mean that it won't help. And like I said, everything takes up time. So to me, everything takes up space in your mind. So I'm just at a point in my life where I just kind of want to do what I want to do. But that being said, of course, we still enjoy a good book or a good movie. And so all of that, I want that to continue. I don't want the end of the world. It's not possible to read every book. It's not possible to see every single thing that happens. And that's why I think for our own sake, we should continue to create art, but, have it, with the same originality and the same level of complexity that older, that the same way that old art was made. And so, that's how I see it. And so that's why I don't read books. And then here they are, there's Carson Daly. Okay, I didn't know he was still here, doing this, a daytime show. But yeah, if you remember Carson Daly back in the day, he was an MTV. But yeah, so anyway, this is an interesting article. I would say that, in my view, reading is something that, do I recommend it? Obviously I do. But at the same time, you also want to look at it from a philosophical standpoint. Is it the highest sign of intelligence? And in my view, I actually don't think it is. And I know that might sound weird to say, but I don't think it's the highest sign of intelligence, because there are other things you could do too. Intelligence is not just reading. And to me, reading in a way is it's kind of like a prison if you think about it, because it can make you, yes, it fills our mind with ideas and it allows us to communicate. But at the same time, it gets in the way of other things that humans can do as well. And it gets in the way of other activities, specifically physical, right? Think about it. Sports, that's physical. That's not reading. And yet sports are extraordinary, right? Creation, I just talked about creation, right? The mind can either consume or create. That gets in the way. If you just read all the time, you're not creating. I guess you're creating in your mind, imagination, but you're not creating. You're not doing what the writer did. Right? It's like watching somebody, play a sport, but never trying the sport yourself. Right? Or it's right? The writer, but do you think the writer was reading, or the writer was writing a lot? Right? At least back in the day, if they were doing it properly. So, I'm just saying that when we approach writing, when we approach all this, that we, be cognizant. I guess I'm getting more philosophical here, but I don't think that writing is just about, I don't think reading is just about, it's just the sign of intelligence. It is, obviously, but it's not the ultimate thing. I think our brain can do so many things. And to me, I put a higher value on creation, and I want people to be creative. And I want people to, books, they have a place, but they're not the end all be all. I want people to create. I want people to make. I want you to get up and do something using your mind or your physical, and so books can help you. Absolutely. Or if, it doesn't matter. I'm not really saying one way or another, to be honest with you. I'm really not. Because no matter what, I mean, some people actually, as a hobby, love reading. So that's a very, a good pastime for sure. And it certainly helps. And especially if you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor or anything where you're going to be reading a lot, a librarian, then obviously reading is what you should be doing. You're being paid to do that. But I mean, for most people, or historian, right? Historians also read a lot. But I'm saying for the average person, I would encourage people to explore the world of reading. Certainly, I believe in that. I believe that we should promote that. I believe that literacy is important. But I also think it's important to read, or I should say to create. And it's not the only sign of intelligence. Just because somebody reads a book does not mean they're the smartest, believe it or not. I actually think intelligence is more about creating. And so I would rather see someone that can create content, or that can, not just content, but just, it's not even content. It's just the ability to come up with an idea and then throw it into the world, whether it's an invention or it's a physical object or or whatever it is, even if it's a sport. When someone is dancing, they're dancing in a unique way, right? That nobody else dances, hopefully, right? Like we add a little flair to everything that we do. Our fingerprints are left on everything that we say. Now, as far as why do men not read books, I would say the answer to that would probably be that, I don't know, probably because men are just more physical and would rather do something more focused. Okay, so the answer to the question of this, like why don't they read typically, because typically they don't tend to read, although that might, I don't know that that's true always, but I guess if you want to extrapolate this into our modern society, right, I think, I would just say that I think most men just prefer video games, or they prefer movies, it's more of a visual thing. But more than that, though, I think it's more about, it's not even about that so much as men are a little more focused on things, they're more focused. And I think with reading fiction, you kind of have to focus on art. You have to appreciate art. Not that men can't appreciate, obviously, men can appreciate art too, but it's really just about, I guess most men just want to kind of do something with their lives, or focus. They're too focused on other things in life. And so I don't think they would extend their focus so much on this. That might be an issue, but I don't know. That's just an idea. Now, as far as, so let's just answer this question. Like, obviously, reading is fundamental. Okay, I just got that. Men. I think reading is good, but like I said, it can also get you stuck, right? Like, imagine if someone is just obsessed with reading. Just because somebody reads and understands, obviously it helps you understand things, but that doesn't mean that you are good at strategizing, or that you're good at coming up with new ideas. Some people, they read and all they do is they always quote something. Have you ever met someone like that? They read and everything they say, they're always like, well, and I understand why people do this, right? When they go to college, right, you have to give references. And so it makes sense that in the scientific community, for example, you would be like, well, this person says this, and in this study, it says this, and in this study, it's almost like they speak, like they forget that they're not in school anymore, and they're always, talking about references, and that's great in a scientific paper, right? Where that's important, obviously, where things are peer-reviewed. But in terms of like your own ideas, you don't need to give me references to give me your own idea, right? You are your own reference. So sometimes I want to read what you think, even if it's wrong. I want to hear what you think, even if it's wrong. And I think it's just a different approach. Now, obviously, that has nothing to do with nonfiction, or fiction, I should say, because, writing scientific papers, that's nonfiction, right? But I'm saying this because I guess it just harkens back to what I just said before, which is that, the idea of, I want to hear what you have to say, right? I want to see what you have to say. And intelligence is more than just Because some people use books kind of as a crutch. They use it as a way to quote things and to say things. And I've met people like this. And sometimes I just kind of wish that I could hear their voice instead. I want to hear you. I want to hear what you think. And if anything, the appropriate thing to do with fiction is to turn it inside out and give me your analysis, criticize it, turn it upside down, do whatever you want with it. And I don't know if our society is prepared to do that with our fiction. And so that, it makes it so that it's not that it's interesting. And yeah, so that's why I would encourage you to analyze and look at the world. And it would be good for us to do that. And so in that regard, art and fiction plays a role, because you can use that as a bouncing board to actually come up with something different. That being said, I don't want to make it sound like I think everything should be changed and nothing should ever stay the same. Of course, I do believe in the universality of things. And so I do think that we should, I don't like change, as weird as it sounds. So here I am, it looks like I'm twisting myself up, but really I'm not, because I don't really even like change, even though I keep talking about that. But I do think that it's good that over time, our fashions, our modes, the things that are in style, whether it's clothing or music or fiction, writing, that it change over, we should see a sense of difference, at least with time, because it would be a shame if we just kept doing the same thing over and over again. So, but yeah, like I said, I want to hear what people have to say, right? I want people to expand and to grow into what humanity can be. And I think books can be restricting in some ways. You got to be careful with books too. You can't just extol it. It's not like, oh, this is the fundamental. I don't know that I would agree with that. Even that statement itself, it's a little too bold for a reading and for books. Not to say that I don't like books. This is a study channel. Obviously, I promote it to some extent, right? But at the same time, from a philosophical standpoint, and just looking at this open-mindedly, right? I don't worship books either. I don't think books are the greatest, and I also don't think they're necessary even if somebody chooses not to read. You could be intelligent and not have ever read a book. As crazy as that sounds, but yes. And so at the end of the day, books can actually be a hindrance. And this is something that Plato, or Aristotle, I'm pretty sure it was Plato, in one of the books, you need to understand that when literacy, the ancient Greeks, they were able to see and experience and even articulate how books were taking over, because people were scared when writing and when words and alphabets were formed. That revolutionized the world. And for people who for thousands of years had never written anything down, it was scary. Books were scary. And books have the power to overrun and to some extent overpower the sense of authority, right? Because if something is written down and something is in writing, all of a sudden it carries and holds a certain authority that just normally didn't exist before. And this was something that, the ancient people, particularly the ancient Greeks, because we have their texts, we don't have all of it, of course, but we have some of it. Unfortunately, most of it is lost or gone, because, it's hard to preserve things that, back then they had to write it by hand. And so, unfortunately, actually, libraries are lost, but we do have some. And the pieces that we do have, sometimes, just put yourself in their position and how they approached reading and how to them it was completely different and how it was almost magical. And at the same time, they actually didn't always see it as positive, believe it or not. They could see that there was more talent in the people who could memorize. Their memories were amazing back then. The human mind It's just different when it doesn't know how to read. An illiterate person has certain magical abilities that are unthinkable to us because we're almost all literate. So we don't see people like that, but they saw it. And I think it's interesting when you see how these early writers, these Greek writers, these ancient Greek writers, they were able to also see how the detriment that a book could have, because books can make you think that you're doing something when you're really not. You're just sitting there, right? And that doesn't mean that you can't accomplish great things with books, right? But I also want to, balance that and talk about how, do I think it is the ultimate thing or the ultimate expression of intelligence? Not really, And unfortunately, because life is so short, that, sometimes I wonder what is the best way for a human to live their life and contribute in a way that is meaningful. And so reading and books, it's hard for me to even explain this, but like on the one hand, yes, they contain knowledge, but on the other hand, it's just a moment in time, and it puts way too much credence and power to these words that are online, that are on text. It puts way too much power to it, and to some extent, you might argue that books are kind of overrated in that sense, because instead of, in the past, right? Imagine if you could think, you might think that we're more intelligent than cave people, but really, are the Neolithic or Paleolithic, put yourself into the Paleolithic mind, right? Before history, before writing existed, or when it was nascent, right? When it was starting out. Like these people, they didn't really read, but they were extraordinarily gifted speakers because you were forced to do that. You couldn't read, and you had to memorize things. You had to write things. You had to understand the world in a different way. And I wonder how much we're missing out by seeing that, by not being exposed to that. And we see a little bit of this too as well, where a lot of the explorers, right, when they came into the Americas and they found sort of native people who were different, who did not have literacy the same way that Western Europe had. And so the idea is, but they still saw extraordinary, for the open-minded at least, there were still extraordinary things that they did, and the way that they lived their lives, that was just so different. And that kind of stuff is missing. And I wonder if we could look back and have a little humility and realize what it would be like without books, and how it's possible that maybe books aren't really the end all be all, right? It's great, but there's it can limit you too, is what I'm saying. And in fact, I wonder about that. And to put it another way is the idea that when you have a book, it has like I said, it has authority, but it's really just one point of view, right? That any book has. And so sometimes, I don't know that you would want just one, I don't know that if you could, it can sometimes make you think that it's real in a way that it might not necessarily be. Like there might be other ways of looking at the world. Even language itself, right? Think about our words that we use, right? The vocabulary. It makes us think a certain way, right? The definitions are set in a specific way, but the definitions could be different. We could put emphasis on other ideas. And so that's what I'm saying. It's not that I'm against books. It's that ideas themselves are creations. And ideas are something that can be recorded in books. But ideas is what we're lacking in our world right now. And there are more ideas that have not been written down There are more concepts that haven't been put into recording, okay, that haven't been recorded. And that's really what I'm talking about here. There's just more out there. And so I don't want our world to just be contained in books, but instead to understand that there are many ideas out there that are yet to be discovered and explored.